Hello, and welcome, everyone. My name is Stephanie Jackson. I am the Academic Programs Partnership Manager here at Georgia Tech. We want to welcome you to our latest installment of our Safety Speaker Series this year. And this is going to be a quite interesting and engaging session. It is called Safety Jenga, the evaluation of safety leadership focusing on controls and capacity. We have a special guest speaker, Michael VanHorn of Brasfield Gorrie. Now, if this is your first time here, or maybe you are returning, I just want to remind you that this Safety Speaker Series is presented by the Professional Masters in Occupational Safety and Health. And so now I want to introduce you to Dr. Babak Ashuri, our Executive Director of the Professional Masters in Occupational Safety Health Program, and he's going to let you know a little bit about our program and then introduce you to our speaker for today. So Babak, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you guys are. I appreciate flying in today for kickoff of our series, our Professional Masters in Occupational Safety and Health speaker series. We cannot think of a better speaker to kick off our series for this academic year, Michael VanHorn from Brasfield Gorrie, Safety Director. Well, I'm going to introduce Michael in a second, but let me tell you a little bit about Professional Master's Degree in Occupational Safety and Health, which in short we call it PMOSH. It's a multidisciplinary program. It's a 2-year program. Most of that online. It's an online degree with some touch points that you come to campus for certain kind of activities. There are 10 courses in the programs. You take one course at a time. And it prepares you for safety journey, safety leadership. Many people that come to the program will be able to advance in occupational safety and health career. Some people actually use that as an opportunity to kind of switch more into the safety field, which is a growing field, as you're aware of that, both on the environmental safety and health and of course the occupational safety and health part of it. So in 2 years, you get exposed to a wide range of technical classes, ranging from fundamentals of the safety, becoming more familiar with the OSHA guidelines, ISO certification, as well as industrial hygiene, hazmat management, and ergonomics. And also you learn the technical, in addition to the technical, you learn the soft aspects of that. The soft aspects of it, that's in terms of leadership, communication, team building, presentation skill sets, as well as economic analysis. You would be able to present your argument as far as your safety improvement as a business practice. So how you apply risk management into the process, how you deploy that, and also you learn about the insurance part of it, which is related to workers' comps and other risk mitigation strategies. So at the end of the second year, you will apply all you learn, soft skills and hard skills. You apply that to the real world projects in a capstone environment. So we are accepting applications for our cohort that starts in fall 2025. As you can imagine, this is starting in a cohort format. You start with a group of people in August and work with each other, one course at a time, and you move throughout the whole program in about 2 years. So the program is also certified as a graduate safety practitioner designation by the Board of Certified Safety Professionals. So once you complete the requirements of the degree, you are automatically eligible to receive your GSP designation. As if you need any information about the program, we also offer information session, application preparation, which I'm sure our friends in Georgia Tech Professional Education would be able to answer any questions you might have. But regarding our safety speaker today, we are honored to have Michael VanHorn. Michael holds a MS degree in occupational safety from Eastern Kentucky University. He's a safety professional from the Board of Certified Safety Professionals. He's currently working on finishing up his doctorate degree in strategic leadership from Liberty University. He started his career in the fire service as a firefighter, and we are thankful for your service. Then he moved into the corporate safety work with Jacobs Engineering, Marel, Colonial Pipeline, and the last 5 years he has been in Brasfield and Gorrie. He's a regional safety director covering mission critical sports and entertainment, corporate services, education, and research divisions for Brasfield and Gorrie. Without any further ado, let's give Michael a big yellow jacket round of welcome. Michael, floor is yours.
Hey, good afternoon. Again, my name is Michael. So this is a presentation that I present at the ASSP conferences. I just did one down in Texas a couple weeks ago. But when we talk about safety and safety Jenga, everybody's familiar with with Jenga as a party game. And again, the idea of the Jenga party game is obviously to remove blocks, place it on top, and to win the game, you kind of put your partner in a disadvantage by putting some blocks where when they remove theirs, it's either super hard or they bump it and it knocks it all over and it falls. The game itself is pretty simple, but like in life, people make decisions based on what they feel is their best move. And for the folks in this series, think about, as we're going through this presentation, one of the things I want you guys to do is think about your job sites, whether you're already in safety or you're working toward becoming a safety professional. Think about the people that you work with on a regular basis, because that's really what we're gearing toward, is the employees, and how leaders need to make decisions based on really what's going on with their company. So most of the time, our folks, we're not wanting to take shortcuts. They're not wanting to break the rules, and they're really not even making bad decisions. Many times we don't even realize it was a bad choice until after the event was over, and we look back and like, man, that was probably not a good decision to make. Safety Jenga is no different. Employees are inherently smart, creative, adaptable, and they face challenges every single day, regardless of their industry that they're in. And they make those decisions based on their experience and knowledge, which, I mean, if you look at a Jenga set, it's really, that's what they're doing. They're looking at it and trying to figure out what is their next best move. And so I'm going to share a story with you guys. Many years ago, when I was in the fire service, we were responding to a call, and we were on shift, and the alarm goes off, and we wake up, and I'm trying to gather my wits of like, hey, where are we going? What do we need to do? How do we need to prepare? And we get and the dispatcher comes across and says, we have a commercial structure fire. We have received multiple alarms, which in the firefighter world, when you've received multiple alarms, that usually means it's pretty legit. It means that there's something really going on versus, just a single alarm. So we get up, we get the address, we run to the truck, and I put on my my jumpsuit, my pants, suspenders, and then we have a thing that's it's a flash hood, is what we called it. Balaclava, so there's multiple names for it, but for this conversation, I put on my flash hood and pulled it down, put my jacket on, and as we're headed to the address, I'm putting on my SCBA and really preparing to go in and really what do we have when we get there. So I finished dressing out. We get there, we jump off the truck. Me and my partner grab the hose line, and we beeline into the structure, because we got fire coming out the top of the building. So we make entry, and probably about 15-20 feet off, I have the nozzle, and we're spraying water trying to knock this fire down, and my partner starts smacking me on the back. Well, in that situation, you only have visual of what's in front of you. You can't see what's behind you because of all the PPE that we wear as firefighters. So you never know when your partner's smacking you on the back, telling you we gotta back out. You never really know what that means. So you don't question, you just back out. And so when we backed out and we got to a safe distance, I asked him, I said, "What's going on? What'd you see?" He said, "My ears were burning." And I said, "What do you mean your ears are burning?" He said, "My ears are burning. I forgot to put my flash hood on." And I was like, "Man, how do you forget that?" So he puts it on. We go back in and we go back to doing what we were sent there to do, which was extinguish the fire. And afterwards, we had a conversation, and this, we realized that he made a mistake of not putting his flash hood on or his PPE required, but it wasn't an intentional decision that he made to say, "Hey man, I'm just not going to wear it," right? He just forgot. And so one of the things that we did is we actually started having a buddy check prior to us going into a building. He would give me a once over, I'd give him a once over, made sure we were good to go before we made entry into any other structure. And what we were doing, not knowing it at the time, what we were doing, we're actually building capacity in our ability to perform our job. And that's something that we're going to talk about today, is that capacity. But before we get to capacity, we've got to talk about the traditional based safety and behavior, which is also known as behavior based safety, or safety two. And we're going to kind of talk about the little differences between the two and how we get there. So as you see on the screen, the first column is safety one. That's, as a leader, and if you've been in safety for any time, you want kind of understand where this is coming from. But basically, safety one is the traditional view of safety, and a lot of people call it behavior-based safety or BBS or something along that. But the challenge with this perspective is that when an incident occurs, it's 100% the employee's fault. So we've got to fix the worker, because the employee, is the one who made the bad decision, and they are the ones who caused the event to occur. And then two, we must tell our workers that what to do and what not to do. So we kind of got to treat them like kids, and like you would treat your child of, hey, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. And safety is not the absence, or I'm sorry, in this perspective, safety is the absence of accidents. So if you go on a job site or in a facility and you have zero accidents, then the perception is that your facility or your job site is safe. And that's kind of a weird thing, because you're not going to hear too many. I think you hear more people say it now, but you can't prevent 100% of accidents. I know that may not be popular for some people to hear, but it is a true statement. Where safety two is kind of the new view, and it was kind of brought on by Todd Conklin in 2019, and he kind of wrote a book about it, of the human organizational performance, or HOP. Those are some of the key words that get thrown around a lot. But the difference with safety two, and why safety two is a better program or philosophy when it comes to safety, is because workers are not the problem, but the problem solvers. We don't have to tell our organizations what to do. We ask them what they need. And we also have to understand that safety is not the absence of accidents, but it's the presence of capacity to be able to do your job safely. Because one thing I can tell you that is true, and it doesn't matter where you come from, your background, how much experience, knowledge, degrees, people make mistakes. We all make a mistake, and I can guarantee you I will make multiple mistakes through this presentation. And you guys have probably made mistakes today, just because we're human, and that's what happens. So if you look at this is the incident pyramid. I'm sure everybody is familiar with the incident pyramid, and on the left is the Heinrich pyramid. That was created in 1931, and it was later kind of redeveloped by Bird in 1966, but Heinrich still gets the credit for it, and I'm sure everybody has seen this. We probably still teach this in some undergrad programs. I know we recruit a lot from universities, and this is still being taught in their programs. And basically what this says is if we have a whole bunch of unsafe acts, we're going to have roughly 600 near misses, 30 minor incidents, 10 serious incidents, and we're going to, because we've had so many near misses, we're going to kill somebody. And that's kind of the principle behind behavior-based safety, is if we don't stop the unsafe acts, those unsafe acts are going to lead to killing people. And that's not always the case, and we'll dive into that here in just a little bit. But we're gonna talk about, move into leading indicators. So we've all heard of leading and lagging indicators throughout our careers, and so leading indicators is designed as a predictive measure of future performance. It's a thought process, but the question that I have for you guys is, can data really be predicted where the next injury or fatality is going to be? So as a company, we actually decided to take a hard look internally, and we've not really found that those two are related. Knowing that leading and lagging indicators cannot predict fatalities, what else is there going to be? There's got to be something that we can do to help put processes in place to help mitigate some of the events. So we started questioning the data, and what I want you guys to think about is, are recordable and lost time rates valuable? In some cases they are, depending on if you're chasing projects. I mean, we have to do it because it's an OSHA requirement to track recordables and to report. And this presentation is not going against what we have to do to meet the requirements, but it's a thought process of what can we do differently to protect the people doing the work on a daily basis. The other question that we had to ask when we look at the data is, if you look at the statistics, overall recordable rates have gone down over the years. Has our job sites actually become safer for workers? And if so, are we successfully lowering the rates, but how come the fatalities are staying the same? Are all injuries equal? And if I have a recordable rate of 0, but I still have a fatality, why does that occur? Because if I just look at the statistics and the data, and knowing that my recordable rates for a project or a company has gone down, are they equal? And that's kind of goes back to, are all injuries the same? And I would say not. And so we wanted to kind of take a look and see what we could do differently to take a shift, a step change per se. And this is kind of where we started to land, is the problems on the horizon. The things that hurt people are not the same things that kill people. If you were to go look at your job sites or your companies and look at all the events and injuries that you have, and if you've ever unfortunately been part of a project or a company where somebody has been killed, I can almost guarantee you that the things that are hurting your employees are not the same things that are killing them. They're doing a lot of high-risk activities. They're doing a lot of stuff. And it all comes down to, if we only focus on blaming the employees and saying, hey, you made a mistake, instead of looking at the system and the process, then there's some challenges there that we as an organization have to overcome. In 1897, Oscar Wilde wrote a letter regarding the prison system, and I really think it holds true today. He made a statement that said, it's not the prisoners who need reformation, it's actually the prison. We work in an inherently dangerous industry, and we do not get safer job sites by fixing people. We get there by fixing the system in which they work in. And so what does that really mean? I mean, it really means that if all we do is look to blame the worker, we're expecting them to be perfect 100% of the time. And that forces us to have to look internally at our own systems, our own processes, and we've got to put controls in place so that when people do make mistakes, there is capacity in the system so they can fail safely. And so what we know as facts, our next fatality will come from an uncontrolled energy. And I'm not talking just specifically with electrical. I know that's where our minds go when we talk about energy, but it's going to come from an uncontrolled energy. That uncontrolled energy exists on every single project, every single facility that you guys touch and that you guys are aware of, in not only in the US, but in the world. And we know for a fact that humans make mistakes. So what can we do? We need to focus on systems and controls instead of workers that we cannot control. We need to review capacity and systems and increase when feasible. It includes, and we're all guilty of this, and it's a shame to say, but we all do fall victim to this, and this is where we as leaders make mistakes, is sometimes we wait until an event occurs before we do anything differently. The question I have for you guys, and I want you to ponder, is if you have a situation that you guys are facing, and whatever the case may be, and if you have an event that occurs in that situation that you're going to implement new rules, new controls, why would we not go ahead and do that first and prevent the event from ever happening? Now, we will never know if the only way we'll know if it's successful is if it doesn't ever happen, but we do get into that challenge, and we've got to make sure that we're preparing our people so when stuff does happen that they can fail safely. We've got to continue to push back on the old way of thinking of just blaming people, because we do know people make mistakes. And then you can either blame or you can learn, but you cannot do both. Those two things cannot happen at the same time. And realistically, safety is not the absence of accidents. Safety is the presence of capacity. And so one of the things that we actually have done, and this kind of sounds, when you say it out loud and you don't really understand the process, it sounds kind of weird, but we look at all events in a good and lucky perspective. Good, now this is not an outcome-based judgment call. We put some parameters around it, so it's very black and white. If an event happens, regardless of the outcome, we consider it a good event if all regulatory and SHIMS controls were in place. And SHIMS is our safety, what we call our safety manual. So that can be replaced with whatever you guys call your safety manual. But good is when all regulatory safety manual controls are in place. Lucky is when we're missing a control that is a regulatory or a safety manual control that we say, hey, look, we know that you need to be tied off when you're over 6 foot. Well, if somebody falls and they're tied off, we consider that a good event when we're talking tracking and trending of where we can improve, because what we want to do is, and what we've also realized is, most of the events that we have, it always ties back to this was an event that was lucky because we were missing a control. And think about if you go and do if you're excavating and you hit a underground utility. Well, underground utilities, if you go through the process and have underground markings, you have or get your GPRS, and so they're scanning the ground to see where things are. You have your as-built to show you where things were in place, and you kind of put those together to make sure they line up and they match. You have, above ground utility markings. You went through the dig permit process to make sure that, we checked all of these things, and we hit a underground utility that was not marked because it did not get picked up on the underground mapping. Then we would consider that a good event, because everything that we know that we can do to prevent that from occurring, we did. Now, a lot of times we find that we as people, and I'm using we collectively for anybody that's on the job site, we missed. If we missed an opportunity and we did not do above ground utility markings, or we missed and we didn't do the the GPRS or the utility mapping, if we miss one of those controls, then that is a lucky event. And that's an area that we have to beef up, and we have to figure out why we were missing a control, and not just saying, hey, excavator operator, you screwed up, you get fired and all that kind of stuff, because we can't get better if we're not learning. And the other part of this is, and we'll talk about this we'll get there in a minute about accountability. But again, good and lucky has nothing to do with the outcome of the event. It is just a method of tracking how we control energy. So when we talk about, a minute ago, we've got to make a step change, and these are the 5 principles of human performance. And what I want you to know is principles are like rule games. In general, they do not tell us what to do, but they provide some operational and philosophical guidance, thus establishing what we know is true and allowing us to build leadership strategies and truth. These 5 principles are not telling us how to manage safety in our organization, but it's giving us guidance on how to do it better. All right, just like you've heard me say, people make mistakes. Error is universal. Even our best people make mistakes. And if you were to take and Google people make mistakes, there's over 5.4 million results, and even perfectionists make mistakes. Our people are creative and adaptive every day. People inherently want to do good and please the people and please you guys, the folks that they work for, by getting their job done on time without causing any issues. But knowing this, people make decisions based on 5 things. And these 5 things are what I call resources. It's time, tools, material, people, and equipment. So if you're thinking if your folks are truly prepared to do the job that they need to do they have enough time to do the job? Do they have the right tools to do the job? Do they have the right material or enough of the material to do the job? Do they have the right equipment to do the job? And is there enough people to do the job, or expecting 2 or 3 people to do the job of 5 to 8? And if we're not as leaders, if we're not providing those resources, our folks will get the job done, but their decisions are going to be based on those 5 things. People are so creative and adaptive that they're an integral part of our operation. However, they're the least reliable part of an operation. People can fix complex problems in real time, but still trip over the concrete walking in the parking lot. People are smart enough to read plans, install wire, install outlets, sprinkler lines, blockouts in precise locations, yet not smart enough to not cut their own hand when they're stripping wire or cutting an apple. I don't know about you guys, but I fell victim of cutting my own hand while trying to prepare dinner because my finger was too close to the carrot I was slicing. And if we even go a step further, in 1953, Rocket Chemical Company was trying to create a line of rust prevention solvent and degreasers that they would use in the aerospace industry. It took them 40 times to get to this water displacing formula before it actually worked out. So that means they failed 39 times before they got to what they were trying to accomplish. And we know that product is WD-40 today. And obviously the reason it's water displacement 40 because it happened on the 40th try. So what we have to understand is, knowing that people are the least reliable part of a system and that they will make mistakes, we've got to account for those when putting in controls so that we can create capacity for failure, because we know it will happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Now, this is always a controversial topic when I put this up. You know, bad things happen to bad people. And, you know, I want you to think that your first reaction when you saw that slide was, nah, that's not right. Bad things don't happen to bad people. Then why do we treat people when they make a mistake or have an event like they're a bad person? Because we do it all the time. And of course, bad things can happen to anyone. And the problem with being wrong is that before you know you're wrong, you feel you feel like you're absolutely right. And I don't know if this is a true statement or not from every man ever, but most of the guys that I know are very hard-headed and stubborn, and so typically we feel this way and in anything we do. And what I would ask you is, you know, have you ever been doing something? And you know, a lot of the folks that I speak to are hunters or fishers or something like that, and you know, and I've heard stories of them telling me when they go hunting, they'd kill a deer, and they would have swore it was on public land where they have the permit to hunt, but either the deer ran and it ended up falling on private property, or it was actually on private property and you just didn't know where it was, but you swore up and down you were 100% right until you get that fine. Or you're driving down the road and you swear that the speed limit is 55, but really it's 40, and now you realize you're wrong once the blue lights hit you from behind, and you end up with a ticket. The second portion of this 5 principles is blame fixes nothing. Have you ever been in a post-incident review, had somebody, maybe you have done it yourself. I know I've been guilty of it. If I was doing this task, I would have stopped the task before that event occurred. Blaming someone may feel like you actually did something, but in reality, it doesn't change the outcome, and it doesn't make your organization any better. The funny thing is 2 things are usually true. One of 2 things are usually true. One, the folks that are making that statement may not even know how to do the task at all. They're very good at Monday morning quarterbacking, but they couldn't actually perform the task if they were told to go do it. And 2, it's always easier to be a Monday morning quarterback than it is to actually be in the trenches doing the work sometimes. I mean, we're all guilty of it. I know this past weekend we had a lot of football games going on, and you know, for the you know, a couple weeks ago when the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets went out to overseas and played Florida State, you know, there's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking from Florida State saying, hey, we should have done this better. The coach should have made this decision. And, you know, one thing I'll ask you is when you go into these post-incident reviews, are you being a Monday morning quarterback? Are you actually trying to understand where this person is coming from and what put them into this in the decision to make the decision that they made that ended up in an incident? Because if you think about it, when we have folks on our job sites making decisions, it's kind of like a quarterback that's standing in the pocket and he makes a pass. And every time a quarterback throws a ball, not every time, majority of the time when a quarterback throws a ball, it's a 50-50 ball. But think about your favorite quarterback. Think about a time that he threw a 50-50 ball, and if he catches it, that's an awesome play. The quarterback has excellent football IQ. He can read the field, and sometimes that catch even makes ESPN top 10. But on the flip side, if the ball is intercepted, that's the worst play he could have ever done. How did he not see that tight end standing over there wide open? Same throw, 2 different outcomes, 2 different responses by the Monday morning quarterback. But either way, blame the QB doesn't change the outcome. We've got to understand what led us to get that decision. Why did he make that decision? And how do we get better moving forward? The third principle is learning and improving is vital. Organizations and people have two choices. Like I said at the very beginning, we can learn and improve, or we can blame and punish, but you can't do both. And we have to be very, very intentional when it comes to learning. And if we truly want to understand and truly want to learn, we've got to ask ourselves 3 questions. 1, do we really want open feedback on your processes, systems, and tools that are available to every level of employee? Do we really want to hear honest feedback about how we actually are doing? And are we comfortable hearing bad news? And how often do we punish managers and employees and the messenger? And number 3, are we really committed to making change based on the information that we get from our employees? Because if we ask for feedback, regardless if it's good or bad, we have to do something with that information. And that's the only way that we're going to build trust with the people that we work with and that rely on us on a daily basis. We have to be very intentional about learning, and we can't treat these post events and learning opportunities any differently than, we can't treat them like we treat our Monday morning conversations when we walk past somebody and we ask them how they're doing, knowing good and well we really don't want to hear them talk. We're just doing what we think is Southern and proper. So we want to make sure that we're being very intentional when it comes to learning. Because when we go to learn, what you seek is what you'll find. If you are looking for negativity, that's all you're going to find is negative results. If you're looking for positivity is what you're going to find, and that's how we're going to figure out a way to get better as an organization and what controls are working and what controls are not working. It's really about your perception when you go into these learning calls. Principle number 4 is context drives behavior. This is probably one of my favorite principles out of these, and the reason I say it's my favorite is because organizations develop the context through culture, and you hear a lot about, well, what's your safety culture of your organization? I don't think there's a difference between your company culture and your safety culture. It's actually one thing. Because the context of your organization is going to drive how your people respond and how they feel about the safety, about the quality, about taking care of people. It's all driven through the context of the organizational culture. The way that we respond depends on the context that we're in. And so you're going to say, hey, what do you mean by that? Well, let me ask you this question, and obviously we're not in person, so you can't raise your hands, but I want you to think about, when you're at home and you spend an evening with your family, and then you get invited out with some friends that you went to school with, that you've known forever. Think about that as a second group. And a third group I want you to think about is coworkers. How many of you hang out with coworkers outside of work? I would venture to say that a majority of you do all 3 of those things. I myself do as well. But what's funny is think about how you behave, and do you behave differently depending on the group that you're a part of? Well, the reason I ask you to think about that is because the group, and this context drives behavior. So if we behave differently depending on the group we're in, that is kind of the context of the group is the context. And of course our behavior is the behavior portion of that. So we behave based on the group that we're in. And honestly, it changes a lot. So who sets the context? Well, supervisors, CEOs, and clients. And I would assume that most of the folks on this call are either safety leaders or wanting to be safety leaders, and you fall into that supervisor category if you're not the CEO. So you folks, myself, we're setting the context of the organization that we're a part of. And everything that happens is a result of the context in the organization, and that influences decisions that we all make. And I'm going to talk about, some of you folks may or may not have heard about this study, but it's the broken window theory. And if you're not familiar with it, in 1982, social scientists James Wilson and George Kelling were doing some research, and basically what their research was looking at is, regardless of if a neighborhood is rich or poor, one broken window leads to many more broken windows. One unrepaired broken window is a signal that nobody cares, and so breaking more windows costs nothing. Which is a pretty, and there's a lot more into, in-depth study and understanding of the broken window theory. And, we're not going to get into that. We're going to take it for face value for this conversation. But, one of the things that I found interesting, and I don't know how many of you folks have ever been to Disney, whether it's Disneyland, Disney World, or any other Disney property, but one thing that I've noticed that I've had the privilege to go to Disneyland and Disney World, and one of the things that I found interesting is regardless of which location I was in or which park I was in, it is extremely clean. And so one of the things that I found funny doing some research for this presentation is that even though that the broken window theory post-dates Walt Disney, he understood that context drives behavior. And he was actually told by a famous journalist that when he opened Disneyland, that it would be a mess within a week. And he actually told the reporter, we're going to make it so clean that people are going to be embarrassed to throw anything on the ground. I mean, they're actually, that's why, when you put a trash can every 25 feet, people are more apt to throw things away, because by putting trash cans out, it shows that you're wanting to keep your place clean. And if you go to a job site that is a hot mess, I can guarantee you that there are probably not a whole lot of trash cans or skid pans or anything to throw trash away in. Therefore, people ultimately are just going to throw it on the ground. What I also found was interesting is that Disney cast members spend each night making the park ready for you the next day. So much so that Splash Mountain is actually drained and pressure washed and the pressure washed along with the streets and the sidewalks, all the paint is touched up. They actually can replace entire tree sections and gardens overnight while the park is closed, so that when you come in the next day, it's so magical that you're like, well, holy cow, this is the best place I've ever been. And when I was in Texas, I was talking to a guy who actually used to work at Disney, and he was telling me that they had an event where one of their visitors had tripped over a piece of concrete that was coming up because of the a root was kind of pushing that up, and it created a tripping hazard. Well, they blocked it off, and then overnight they had actually put in a system that prevented people from even walking over there, but did it in such a way that it looked like it was part of the decorations. And they did all this stuff because Walt Disney, at his core, understood that context drives behavior. And if people feel that this place is the cleanest, best place on earth, they would be embarrassed to throw something away. To now, if somebody trips over something, they want to make sure that that's fixed so that nobody else can have that opportunity to trip over it, because they don't want people to get hurt, not because of lawsuits and stuff, but which I'm sure is true, but because that ruins people's experience of being at the happiest place on earth. Excuse me. And then the fifth principle is how we respond to failure matters. And like I said earlier, we have two choices to make when something happens. You can either get better or get even, but you can't do both. Regardless of the situation, success and failure at work are in your personal life, which means your kids, your spouse, your friends, coworkers, subordinates, respond based on how you respond. Think about a recent setback and how did you respond? No matter how difficult the situation or the problem is, the key to overcoming them doesn't lie in changing your circumstance. It's changing yourself. That in itself is a process, and it begins with a desire to be teachable. And if you're willing to do that, then you're able to handle failure. And as leaders, we have to understand that how we respond to an event that occurs really makes a big difference in how the organization responds, how the folks involved respond, and people want to know that you're there to take care of them. Failure is not the end of the world, even though it's not easy to embrace. Without clear thinking, fear of failure and failure itself can undermine our leadership styles, performance, judgment, and even our individual happiness. Because leaders are not generally exposed to the hazards like our folks are. We're not generally in the trenches with the folks doing the work. So our ability is to provide influence on the organization and how we respond to what we're doing and how we respond. And I do want you to understand that one thing I want you guys to take away from this presentation is, one, looking at it from a safety 1 or safety 2 perspective. Obviously, I'm pushing more folks to think toward the system-based approach, but safety 2 does not take away the fact of accountability for folks who are deliberately breaking the rules. We're talking about the folks that are not deliberately trying to shortcut, get injured to sue you, those kind of things. That, those folks have to be held accountable because they're not doing it unintentionally. They're being very intentional of how they're trying to play the game or play the system. So what you're hearing me say about, that all people make mistakes, all of that kind of stuff, is we really got to fix the systems in which our people work in, and that allows them to have a better understanding of the work itself. So some of the key takeaways is, one, I want you guys to walk away and know the difference between safety 1 and safety 2. And the folks on this in this presentation that has never really been part of safety 2, I do challenge you guys, go pick up one of Todd Conklin's books. He's a great guy. I've met him a couple times, and his methodology of safety 2 and how to implement controls is pretty good. We've got to understand that people make mistakes. Even our best folks are going to make mistakes. We got to understand that blame fixes nothing, and we can blame somebody and say it's your fault, but we as an organization will never get better in preventing future things from happening if that's the mentality we take of just blaming people. Learning is vital, and we have to be very intentional when we go to learn, and we've got to ask the right questions, and we got to be open to the feedback and implement that feedback in a productive manner. Context drives behavior. You guys on this presentation are influencers within your organization, and how you respond and how you talk about safety is how your organization will eventually talk about safety when it comes to how we want our people to respond. And again, how we respond to failure, it makes the biggest difference. If we get upset and mad about everything, then we're going to miss some of the opportunities we have to get better. And I want you to have a deeper understanding of controls and capacity, and everything that we do within the safety realm falls down to controls, whether you realize it or not. I mean, when we talk about lockout, tagout, and we're putting locks on energized equipment, that is a control that builds capacity for people to perform that work safely. When we tell people to tie off when they're elevated at 6 foot or greater, that's building in that control so that, if they were to lose their balance and fall, they have the capacity not to hit the ground. And that kind of goes back into making sure you have the right PPE for the task, because if I'm working 10 foot off the ground and I'm allowing people to use my, the 6 foot standard lanyards, Well, I'm giving them a false sense of control because I know and studies show that if somebody falls less than 18.5 feet, they're going to hit the ground. So we want to make sure that we're giving them the right thing. We're giving them the self-retracting lanyards when they're working less than 18.5 feet, or if you want to just call it around 20 feet. If you're less than 20 feet, you've got to have a self-retracting lanyard because the standard lanyard's not going to do you any good. You know, those are the things, those are the controls that we put in place so that we build capacity, because we know people, those events have occurred. We know we've dropped stuff off the side of buildings, so we put in safety nets to catch the debris that when it does come loose. We do everything we can to try to prevent that from occurring with guardrails and debris netting and all those kind of things. But that one off where something does fall off, we want to make sure we have those controls in place to catch it, so that we're not injuring somebody below or a bystander that has nothing to do with the project. That concludes my portion. I will turn it over to Paul if you've got questions or comments or anything that we can kind of discuss.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was a wonderful presentation. My name is Paul Schlumper. I'm an instructor with the PMOSH program, and Dr. Ashuri has asked me to moderate the last part of this session. So if you would, please, if you would put your questions in the Q&A section, should be at the bottom of your screen. You can open up Q&A and insert your questions for Michael. We've got just a few minutes, about 8 minutes left in the session. Let's have your question. Michael, I think they're still thinking, but we'll see if we get any questions here.
This would be the first time I've never got a question.
I'd be surprised. I'm sure we're going to get some. I'm also monitoring the chat, but if you would put them in the question and answer, it'd be easier to check them out. Okay, Michael, can you see the Q&A, or do you want me to read it?
Just read it for me if you don't mind.
Sure thing. We have a question. How do you encourage management and supervisors to help you change the safety culture?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It really starts from the top. You have to understand what motivates your leaders, and you have to help understand. One, you've got to understand what's motivating them to make the decisions that they're making. And once you get there to that understanding, then we have to try to show that return on investment of why it's important for them to be engaged in leading those things. And sometimes, I mean, you know, we have to share the financial responsibility of us not doing something. Sometimes that is the motivator, and to make those step changes.
Fantastic. I do see a question in the chat. What kind of software, safety software systems, or inspection reporting does your company use? Can you share that? Yeah,
so we actually have transitioned over to Procore for a multitude of reasons. We've actually, we use every aspect of the Procore application, but we also use a program called HammerTech, which is pretty neat. I've been a part of the implementation of that on some projects. Some of our clients require that program, so it makes it a little easier to implement or to utilize or try out, whatever you want to call it, new software when your clients are like, hey, we really want you to use X, and you know, if they're paying us, we're willing to try it.
Fantastic. And we've got a couple more questions in the Q&A. Is there currently a field of study that covers HOP?
No, there's not. And that, you know, I know that there's a lot of folks that when you go to like your ASSP conferences or some of the safety conferences, there's a lot of folks that talk about it. There's a lot of folks that kind of have taken the books from like Todd Conklin and those folks who kind of developed the program, and they speak on a lot of their books and the processes that they talk about in their book. And that's where part of this conversation came, or this presentation came from, was from one of his books.
Fantastic. Another question in the Q&A. How do you handle working with a younger workforce who you think just don't get it? Is it them? Is it you? How do you get everyone to work together?
It is a combination of all of those, right? So some of it is them, some of it is me. Us as an, I'm not a spring chicken like I used to be. So I have a different perspective than some of the others, but I've got to get them to, by going through utilizing the 5 principles. And at the end of the day, people just want to know that you care about them as a person. And you've got to be able to use your influence to be able to do that. And sometimes that's very challenging. But again, if you want to get better, you've got to be intentional about learning. And as an older person, you have to be intentional about getting to know your people, what motivates them, why they do what they do. And because I used to think everybody was motivated by one thing, and it's not that way. So it's really getting to know your people and letting them know, and not just know, but show that you care about them as a person and not just a employee number X, Y, and Z.
And we're still getting some questions in. You've got them thinking now, Michael. On the incident pyramid slide, is there not more recent data in 2024? Are we just using the old data for that?
That is you're correct. There is no new data to show, and honestly, even when they developed that many years ago, it was a statistical thing that they kind of threw together, but it's not held true. So just because you have X number of near misses, that doesn't mean that you're going to have somebody die. And that's kind of the point of that slide, is to show that it's irrelevant and outdated. And we as an industry have to get better if we want our industry to get better as a whole.
There's another question, and I don't quite understand the question. Amri, if you could elaborate on your question, I'll get back to you. The next question is, working in the South, how do you encourage working with unions to help drive a positive safety climate?
They're people. I mean, at the end of the day, whether you're union, non-union, I mean, we have union trades that work for us. We have non-union trades that work for us. And at the end of the day, they're just people there to do a job. And you just treat them like regular people and try to help figure it out. Some can be more challenging than others. And it's just, again, we're dealing with people at the end of the day.
You bet. I want to just alert the group that there are some more comments being placed in the chat, some resources and conferences and summits and things like that. So you may want to check that out as well. The next one, do you ever face a situation where restrained financials, aggressive schedules prevail? Meanwhile, excellent safety performance like zero harm is required. How do you handle that?
So currently I do not have to deal with that. Brasfield Gorrie is probably one of the best companies I've ever been a part of, and I've been a part of several. But at the same time, yeah, so that's one of the things that you have to really understand what is driving and figure out whatever you're trying to implement, what the return on investment is, because sometimes we do have, as safety professionals, we do have to give a business case of why we need to do X over Y, and make sure we have a good understanding of, okay, we can't do this, but we can do this, and it may be a little cheaper or less expensive. So we've got to sometimes we do have to get creative, in making sure that we maintain what the requirements are.
Okay. And we are running out of time. I'll read one more question. Do you think human error as the root cause for incidents is skewed due to how we investigate and place our focus?
I don't think that human error is skewed, because we all make mistakes. So if you dig deep enough, you're always going to be able to point your finger that somebody screwed up, somebody made a bad decision. And when we stop there, that seems like we've done something, and it actually doesn't. You haven't done anything. You've just exposed something that is true in every situation. So we do need to dig a little deeper into what caused the event to occur, and what some of the restraints were that led us to make that decision, because you always can always ask yourself this: if I was to put somebody else in that situation with the same resources, the same whatever, are they going to make the same decision? I don't know. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't, but a lot of that's based on experience and knowledge.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you everyone for joining us. We will have another session coming up in November. Michael, fantastic presentation. We appreciate your time. Stephanie, you want to close us out?
Yeah, if Kirk can switch back to the other slide deck really quickly. I just want to share with everybody the QR code for our PMOSH program. We are accepting applications right now for the fall 2025 cohort of the PMOSH program. So if you're interested in applying for our program, you can scan this QR code. It'll give you access to our website as well. If you have any questions, you can contact us through that as well. So I just wanted to share that. Again, thank you, Michael, for joining us. We appreciate your time and your expertise, and appreciate everybody for taking time to attend today. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.